Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we do something rather unusual. We are going to convene, as of today, a 2-week, 10-session exploration of peace, one of the best-kept secrets in the world. Most of us live very peacefully, and yet all we are preoccupied with is conflict and war, particularly as driven by the mainstream media and other instrumentalities of power. The UN Day of Peace is next week on the equinox, so we thought it was fitting to celebrate peace in our world, which is being torn by conflict at multiple levels in multiple sectors. And so over the next 5 days, what we want to do is, as I begin each morning, I'm going to touch on various aspects of war. And then the main body of our program will talk about peace within the framework of peace being the world's best kept secret, because the more we know about peace, the more pervasive we know that it really is. So we're going to do some Tolstoyan war and peace interweaving. We'll be laying out some of the polarities that are shaping human existence. As Dickens said in his opening of A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times and the worst of times. And that is true of our world. Things are getting better and better, and worse, faster and faster. And it's our capacity to hold these contradictions and to bring them together in a dynamic tension that gives us both the moral maturity, but also the internal capacity to bring the tensions together in a way that redeems and to produce what Plato called the enlargement of the soul. So today I want to touch on what, in my view, and I think in the view of many commentators, is the most pressing challenge confronting humanity in terms of conflict. And that is the escalating conflict toward nuclear war emanating out of what is taking place in Ukraine. It's very important for us to take in that according to Jeffrey Sachs, the economist at Columbia University, and many other commentators, the world is now closer to nuclear war than at any time since the beginning of the nuclear age, when the United States actually dropped nuclear weapons on Japan. That includes the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. We're not hearing about it in the news. It's being deliberately kept from public gaze, except in a few isolated articles. But all of us, as we begin our week, our 2 weeks on peace, need to take in that we are closer to nuclear war than we've ever been in the nuclear age. And I want to explain just a few points about why that is and what that means. As the war in Ukraine has carried forward, the Ukrainians are now dramatically losing the war at every level. The Russians are expanding their territory west toward the Dnieper River. The incursion into the Kursk region was a failure. It's turned into a killing field. The Ukrainians are losing between 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers dead or wounded every 24 hours. They're no longer able to replace the soldiers that they've lost because the able-bodied men in Ukraine, for the most part, have either fled Ukraine. There's over 750,000 eligible men outside of Ukraine. And so the Ukrainians are doing everything they can to bring the United States and NATO into the war. Up to this point, the United States and NATO have given the weapons and the guidance systems to the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians aren't sophisticated enough to use them effectively. So the proposal to the British government and the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer, accompanied by Zelensky, made at the White House just a few days ago, was that the British and the French and the Americans come in alongside the Ukrainians and begin to be full partners in sending long-range missiles deep into Russia, with NATO and US piloting strategic guidance systems, so that it was not the Ukrainians sending the missiles, but the United States, Britain, and France. The Russians responded very dramatically, saying that if this took place, essentially, NATO and the United States would be entering war with Russia. And if this happened, said Putin in a major speech 3 days ago, the dangers of nuclear exchange increase exponentially. The neocons in the United States, the neocons in Europe, the Victoria Nulands of the world, the Anthony Blinkens of the world, the Secretary of State, Lindsey Graham in the US Senate, are all pressing Joe Biden to agree to that which, up to this point, the Americans have indicated is a red line they will not cross. The meetings in the White House were inconclusive. They apparently did not reach an agreement. The British were bitterly disappointed. The Ukrainians were also very disappointed. And the upshot of what we gather from these secret meetings through the various leaks that always happen in these occasions is that the US president said, I really can't decide. Let's decide next week when we're at the United Nations. So in one of the supreme ironies of events, while the world and Humanity Rising celebrates peace, culminating next week on the International Day of Peace, the NATO powers at the United Nations, as they celebrate peace, are going to be making a decision as to whether they escalate the conflict in Ukraine closer and closer to nuclear war. We're in the best of times. We're in the worst of times. Things are getting better and better and worse, faster and faster. And it's our capacity to look both realities ruthlessly in the eye that is the mark of moral maturity for our humanity at this time. So thank you, everyone, for joining Humanity Rising. It's such a delight every day to be with you. Appreciate so much the enthusiasm and support that this community is providing, not only for me, but to all of us as we seek through many, many means to enable humanity to rise to the occasion of our own self-preservation at this moment in history. It's my pleasure now to introduce my very good friend and colleague, Tom Eddington. He needs no introduction. He's as well known to you as I am. So, Tom, I'm going to just turn the program over to you with deep thanks and big love for the next 2 weeks. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Jim. And you and the audience are stuck with me for the next 4 weeks, because I'll be doing the next 2 weeks on peace, followed by a week on forgiveness, followed by a week on the future of God. So there's a lot in store for us over the next month. And I'm going to pick up on your references to Tolstoy, Jim, and speak from the voice of another well-known author, Ernest Hemingway. In his book, The Sun Also Rises, there's an exchange between two characters in the book, and one of the characters asks, "How did you go bankrupt?" And the other character in the book responds, 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. And what I'd like to reference is that over the next 2 weeks, my very dear friend and colleague Marilyn King, who has been my inspiration and collaborator for this 2 weeks of programming, we're going to demonstrate that the world actually has been gradually moving more and more towards peace, and suddenly is absolutely possible. And it's really just a function of what story we choose to live our life by. So, Marilyn, I'd love to welcome you into the conversation. It's just such a delight to be with you over the next 2 weeks, and I'd love to start our conversation by just having you share a bit about your personal story. How is it that you have spent the last 40 years focused on peace, and knowing that in your lifetime the world will embrace the narrative that we both know happens to be true, which is that peace can happen in a nanosecond?
Well, I'm happy to go there. You might have to loop me back there, but I can't help but just, listening to Jim, it is so perfect, because that kind of very important information that Jim shared is exactly why these 2 weeks is important. When I listen to Jim, it's like I wake up on fire and so excited because of what I see going on. And I listen to Jim and it's like, oh my God, what could anybody do? And it's like, you just get overwhelmed, and, the biochemistry in my body and my energetics. And it's like, that is exactly why what we're bringing. And Jim, on tomorrow, we start with governance, and we get to shine the light on that we already have information, thanks to Gene Sharp and his research and the history of successful nonviolent revolutions, that we actually know how to address when there is a small group of people who are in power and doing things that the masses don't agree with and don't want. And you can go through, and whether it's the Orange Revolution, I wrote a couple of them down, the Rose Revolution, the Arab Spring, what happened in Egypt with Mubarak, in Estonia, the Singing Revolution. We actually have the information at hand for how to speed shift nonviolently from a governance system that is perpetuating things that are not for the common good, and how to do that. So over these next 2 weeks, we'll be looking at 8 different sectors and really coming to understand what's the history of success in these sectors, what's the current status, and how do we speed shift. We're in a time when we can engage and know how to do systemic change. So that's really the goal of the work that we're just beginning in these 2 weeks, is to use the great tools that we have at hand, and the fact that most people want to live in a world at peace, but they're dispirited, they have incomplete information, old, outdated information, and are inundated with stuff that makes them feel just impotent. And they don't know what to do. So the speed shift is that with things like Peace Day and what we're beginning here, we get to assist people who care about peace to shift from being dispirited and don't know what to do, to inspired, fully informed, and engaged in systemic change in areas that matter. So I couldn't help but comment on what happened to me when Jim was talking. So where did you want me to start, Tom?
Yeah, thank you for that, Marilyn, because the focus of these next 2 weeks is peace literacy.
Yeah.
And we have a world, well over 7 billion of us are living in some version of peace every day.
Yeah.
And yet the peace literacy that's necessary doesn't exist. So it's just a delight to have you as an ambassador of peace to help us educate and inform the world on the level of peace that's happening. So let's start with your personal story. Many people have known you as a 2-time Olympian, a 3-time Olympic Games qualifier, and you've got that part of who you are. But where did the mantle you picked up as being a peace ambassador, where does that come from? Tell us your personal journey.
Yeah, this is not something I would have chosen. It's like, and the truth is, I can't help it. I am an Olympian. There's something I learned and discovered and became as a result of my journey to becoming an Olympian. And I think one of the key things that helps people understand what you're looking at and how I am who I am is when I was 15 years old, I didn't do very well. We moved all the time. I didn't make friends easily. And I found out that going to sports after school made it easy to make friends. And then one day I was at a track meet and I would, place second or third all the time and hoped maybe I would go to the national championships on a relay someday. And then they announced they were hosting the Eastern States Pentathlon Championships. And I thought, wow, we're going to get to see who these superstars are from all up and down the East Coast. And the next announcement said only 2 girls have shown up, and you have to have 3 for a legal competition. So would someone please volunteer? So I didn't know what the 5 events were, but at the end of the day, I was the 3rd best on the whole East Coast, and something I hadn't heard of in the morning. And this was a really big deal. So I started to train, and I'm going to fast forward here. The next year, my little town of Staten Island flew me to California. No coach, no parents or anything. And that was the day that changed my life, because there were only 16 girls from the whole United States. We're talking the 1960s here. Yeah, I'm old. And I placed in the top 10, which to me was a big deal. And the Olympic Committee invited a number of girls to go to the Olympic training camp to raise their performances to be able to perform at the international level. And I went to see, who are these future Olympians? And I didn't expect them to invite me, which they didn't. But they invited a girl who I had beaten. And sometimes you beat somebody who had a bad day, but I knew I was a better athlete than she was. And I had one new neurological firing. I was seized by a thought that if the Olympic Committee, i.e. God, thought she could be in the Olympics and I was better than she was, that meant I could be in the Olympics. It's like, yeah, right. And again, I'll keep the story short, but I spent months trying to let go of that crazy thought. But we now know that cognitive dissonance doesn't mean 2 conflicting realities. It means 2 conflicting beliefs. So the belief that was crazy that I could be in the Olympics and my current belief about my skill sets, they were in deep conflict. But because I couldn't let go of either one, the mind does what it does in what I call cognitive dissonance by design. It gives you new thoughts that lead to new behaviors, and it led me to 3 Olympic teams. So the first thing that I think is important is that, what you're looking at is I was seized by a thought that I could be in the Olympics. And it took me to a whole new life. But what brought me to the peace work is the same thing. In the Olympic Village, I looked around, and again, I had a paradigm shift. And I happened to be in the cafeteria about to sit down. I'm an introvert. I was kind of nervous. These 2 guys on the opposite side seemed like they were in a little bit of contention, and I thought maybe I was in trouble. And they entreated me in. And they were trying to see if I spoke a language that could help these 2 guys communicate. Because he was asking this guy how to find the peanut butter. Where did he find the peanut butter? And I looked on their jerseys, and these two countries were at war with each other. And here were these guys engaging in a very friendly, way. And afterwards, I walked around the village and I thought, there's every race, every religion, every political, and many of these countries at war, multimillionaires and teams that could barely afford. How is it that we're living in peace inside these fences, on the buses, in the cafeteria? And I saw that we could actually see peace in my lifetime if people thought about peace the way all of us thought about our athletic performances. So that's really where it began. I could not get that idea out of my mind. And it wasn't very well received when I came home until I met Willis Harman, world-renowned, one of the top futurists of his day. And he invited me to his home, and I told him about this crazy idea, the Olympic peace team. What if people, saw themselves as a team, because we all want the same thing? And by the way, it's like, oh, do we really? And I found the Brahma Kumaris. They'd gone into 123 countries and asked people what their vision was and put it in a book. And you'd agree with everything that's in there, right? So we have a common goal, but do we really think of ourselves and behave, like a team? And Willis was the one who said to me, he said, he wrote a book called Global Mind Change. And he said to me, the negative belief that peace is not possible is the greatest impediment to achieving peace, because people won't engage in creative solutions, right? They don't have that cognitive dissonance and come up with new thoughts and ideas. And then he said, in terms of the Olympic peace team, he said, global mind change is the fastest way to world peace. And you have Olympians in every country of the world who have high visibility and credibility for how to achieve things that are impossible. And so I got back in my little 69 Volkswagen, having been stunned that Willis Harman invited me to his home. And I sat in my Volkswagen and I went, holy mackerel. I made Willis Harman think. He had new thoughts and was presenting new ideas, and I never looked back. And then the universe continued to put people in my as stepping stones. And to Jim's point, Saturday is the International Day of Peace. One of the next people I met was Ava Madison. And she had 3 tools that I instantly, as an Olympian, saw were key players in global mind change and shifting people's thinking about peace. It's like, oh my gosh, we already have one day that's been unanimously declared by the United Nations when we can all focus on peace. Nobody knew about it in 1981, 2, 3, right? It was like kumbaya in front of the UN, but by 1984, I was speaking at the first global celebration in San Francisco of the International Day of Peace. And 40 years later, I'll be there again on Saturday at noontime. But we get to up level. It was only in 80 countries in 84. Now it's in over 180 countries. And some reports say that there are 3 billion people on the planet who are aware of Peace Day. We can up level its effectiveness so that people are inspired instead of dispirited. They're fully informed because of tools like the Peace Wheel that we'll be talking about, that was created by Avon, and the Peace Wave, just daily practices that you can do what Olympians do to increase the peace if you want to be on the peace team. So I'll try to stop there. It's like, I know people feel like they're being fed by a fire hose, because I wake up on fire every day. And now people can see what I see because of work like what we're doing in this next 2 weeks, and how that will mature so that people can really increase their peace literacy. Instead of being poorly informed and misinformed and don't know what to do, they can be really clear about what they can do to be involved in systemic change in any domain that they think is important. So thanks, Tom.
Thank you for those opening comments, Marilyn. And I want to dive into a couple of them. So first, let's go back to the Olympic Village and that experience you had. And I want to tie it into a lot of the comments that are showing up in the chat, and conversations I've had with people over the last decade. And it's this seeming conflict. So here you are at the Olympic Village. You've got the top athletes in the world who are fierce competitors with each other.
Yep.
Who absolutely are committed to winning the gold medal, to beating each other. And how do you square that circle? How do you speak to people who say, well, we innately are, it's a misappropriation of Darwin's work that says we're a violent species with what, all of the functional MRIs and brain research, et cetera, that shows that we are hardwired for collaboration and cooperation. So let's start there with these, the highest level athletes who are fierce competitors and yet living in peace. And
Yeah.
for all of us as human beings. So let's start the conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, that we could, the directions we could go there, because there's so much misperception. And I have to tell you how painful it is to me how many well-intended people right now are talking about we have to move from competition to cooperation. It's like cooperation has always existed or we wouldn't be here as a species. And if you go back to early humans, everybody had to cooperate in order for their tribe or their clan or their community. They got up every day and had to cooperate. It's in our DNA. And yes, when they were attacked, of course, we have the fight, flight, and freeze, kinds of reactions and protection. But the same thing is true about competition. There are people who are in the win-lose. And we hear people, who speak from that place about, some kind of avaricious, feels like anger, I mean, forgive me, but, Nike was just perpetuates that is just so sad for me that it's just anyway that aspect of there are people who are in the win-lose. But when you have been where I have been in the Olympic Village, and when you watch the American men who are the fastest men in the world pitted against each other from the United States and Russia, and only one of them is going to win the gold medal, you can assume anything you want, but I watched these men cross the finish line of the finals, and before they had even slowed down, these men turned and embraced one another. And they go out drinking together. And they tell jokes and stories, and we're in the discotheque together. And I have a Panamanian fencer friend who says when she's on the runway, it is absolutely, like kill or be killed. And as soon as the match is over, it's hugging and playing and enjoying and all of that. So, and I have to say for myself, I remember being in situations when people would try to tell me about, beating somebody else. And when one of my main competitors didn't perform where she normally did in the high jump, by the way, my event in the pentathlon is 100-meter hurdles, shot put, high jump, long jump, and 800 meters. And one of my primary competitors who always beats me didn't jump that well that day. And people would think that I was happy. I went over to Jane and I said, what happened? What's the matter? I counted on her to continue jumping higher because it inspired me to continue. I was now by myself as the primary competitor in that high jump event. But so I used competition to bring out the best. So that's what for me was pervasive in the Olympic Village, is people who understood competition. And as a matter of fact, one of my 100-meter friends told me that what he spoke to his competitor was thank you. I would not be as good as I am today if it were not for you. So I hope that's helpful to shine a slightly different light on people who try to juxtapose competition with cooperation. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. And I think about, 3 years ago at the Olympic Games at track and field in Tokyo, where speaking specifically of the high jump, and there were two athletes, an athlete from Italy and an athlete from Qatar. And they were, fierce competitors. And the video went viral where they had tied. And the judges were trying to figure out how they were going to reconcile it. And the athletes went over to the judges and said, "Can we both get a gold medal?"
Yeah. And to your point, just this recent Olympic Games, one of my favorite images was in the table tennis competition. It was the three, and it was in the doubles. So 2 competitors on each side. And it was China, North Korea, and South Korea had won the gold, the silver, and the bronze. And the photograph I saw was someone took a picture of the gold medalist holding his phone up, taking a picture with the China, North, and South Korea, and all of them smiling and looking at one another. So, when people try to, talk about competition, it's like, let me talk to you about what it's like at the highest level for most of us. Competition, and I love it. Competition made me better than I could have ever been. So I see that competition can bring out and help us elevate to our best, the best of who we are.
Well, look, one other piece I wanted to pick up before we transition the conversation is around the modern Olympics, 100 and whatever now, 140 years ago. The purpose of it, as I understand it, was to have Olympic athletes as being peace ambassadors. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, Pierre de Coubertin, who founded the modern Olympic Games, and by the way, I think people know that go back to ancient Greece and the pre-modern Olympic Games, where war and conflict was ceased, so that the athletes could travel to the games. So there is a very ancient history that is connected to peace and the Olympic Games. And Pierre de Coubertin was actually an educator and felt that sports and athletics was a great contributor to education. And he was a big proponent and admirer of the ancient Olympics. So when he founded the modern games, at that time, the first article of the Olympic Charter, and I'll quote, he said, its purpose is to educate youth through sport to create a better and more peaceful world. So that was really the founding purpose for bringing the modern Olympic Games into being. And for me personally, I have a lot of sadness about what has become of the Olympic Games, and that first article has been moved down to, I think now, the 22nd position. And everything above that is about, who has the power and who can do this. And they will sue me if I use the Olympic rings and a torch for my work about peace. And when I approached them to do some work together, they wanted to know what profit sharing aspect of any monies that came in they would be due. So I personally have to do a dance around what the current status of the Olympic Games is. That makes me very sad when you have multimillionaires lining up against people who could barely afford to be there. And all of these athletes, now have to deal with what's their brand. And it's just a very, very different game from, I was an amateur athlete. If I made a dime, I would not have been allowed to compete. And there are pluses and minuses to both of these eras. So I hope that's helpful, Tom, to your question.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I want to continue that conversation, and just if you could share with our audience how you're envisioning using Olympic athletes around the world as ambassadors for peace, and to help change the narrative on what's actually happening in the world.
Yeah, it really is the evolution of that concept that my little Volkswagen with Willis Harman, when people were saying, Olympian peace team, good luck with that. And it was like, wow. And he was very, very supportive. But I really saw instantly that, we are in every country and we have credibility for how you achieve things that seem unimaginable, and how people can step into that. So The part of the story that I didn't tell you in terms of what my work is based on is, you know, that in training for my third Olympic team, I took a leave of absence from my coaching position at Cal, and I was going to end my Olympic career with a year to do nothing but train. I'd never had that opportunity over my whole career. I'd worked and gone to school and trained in 5 events. And then my car got hit from behind as soon as I started my winter training, November of '79. And the short story is it produced a bulging disc in my low back that was misdiagnosed. And I thought it was just like a tweak at L5. And my mind just kept saying, you know, I'll be in the top 3 at the Olympic trials. I'm getting better every day, and assume that kink and tweak would go away. But I was rolling out of bed like a log and grab onto the dresser. I couldn't even hop from foot to foot. And it's November of '79, and I've got nothing to do but train. And then it's December and it's January. And I just started watching films of the world record holders because I couldn't even jog. But I kept thinking, I'll be in the top 3 and I'm getting better every day. And months of doctors and physical therapists and orthopedic surgeons. And now it's January and February, and I'm standing on the track for 3 or 4 hours a day thinking I'll be in the top 3 and I'm getting better every day. I can't even jog, but I would stand there, take a big breath, exhale, and I would imagine my trail leg drill over the hurdles or my lead leg drill are coming. So I would spend 3 or 4 hours on the track envisioning either my training or my competition. And I'm just going to fast forward the story. That's all I was able to do all the way through. And we're now at time for the Olympic trials. I have not been able to physically train 6 to 8 hours in 5 events. And I had them give me a facet block, which is like a Novocaine injection, so I wouldn't feel what was going on in my back. And I placed second at the Olympic trials for the 1980 Moscow Games in the pentathlon without physical training for 7 months. That's not possible. You can't do that. There were younger, faster, more talented athletes training 6 to 8 hours a day, and I beat them all except one. So I quit my coaching position at Cal to explore, how do ordinary people like me do something that's impossible? And I spent the next 3 years steeped in the exceptional human performance literature. And if you wouldn't mind, I think we actually have a summary of what my piecework is based on that came out of that research, the Olympian thinking framework of passion, vision, action. And most of the work that I did at that time dove deeply into the work of imagery, visualization, and mental rehearsal. And remember, we're talking 1979, 1980, and this was Nouveau California hot tub stuff. And anytime I tried to talk about it, it was like, oh yeah, you're from California, from the left coast, right? Remember, we're talking 1980, 1981 to 1983. But I was steeped in the literature and books like Seeing with the Mind's Eye by the Samuels, husband and wife, talking about the history, uses, and techniques of visualization. So for 3 years, I was mostly steeped in the middle, and the top line right in the middle about, vision guided. I came to understand that the images that we create affect every cell of your body. So we have a field called psychoneuroimmunology now. They affect your performance, which is what every athlete does. We take a deep breath, we exhale, and we envision exactly what we're going to do, not what we don't want. And it also affects our future. When I couldn't imagine being in the Olympics, I performed in a certain way every day. When I started to think I could be in the Olympics, I had new behaviors. So in that domain, I discovered that what and how we think affects your health, your performance, your future. And I now know it affects our collective future. So that's where this work that we're doing, Tom, is all about. As long as people think that peace is not possible and there's not much I can do and it's overwhelming and too complex, they will not engage creative solutions. So when I went out and started doing that work, what I came to see was it really wasn't sufficient, that people needed to understand that when people achieve at the highest level, when you've done anything that was above and beyond what you'd done before, when you see long-term high performance, it's always what you see in that first icon. It's always passion power. It's not a should or a supposed to or a goal, a GOAL. It's gold. There was nothing I could imagine more exciting than to be an Olympian. You could offer me $1 million or to be an astronaut. You know, I woke every day imagining walking into the Olympic Stadium with one of those USA uniforms on, and it had me behave differently. You know, the vision guided, and then you have to have daily practices, which is why I had a coach and why we need people that have a game plan and give us feedback on that game plan so we can adjust our game plan. So, you know, that's what I discovered and has led me to the work I'm doing now. And so the other 3 lines basically say you have to have all 3. Because if you're passion powered and you think effectively, but you don't have an effective game plan and good daily practices, you know, you're just a dreamer. You've got energy and images, but you're a dreamer. And the second line says you can be passion powered and have really, you know, be doing stuff every day. But if it's not effectively guided by what and how you think, you know, you're really, it's like being a workaholic. You're passionate and very busy, but not effective. And, you know, when there's no passion or just kind of, it's a goal, a GOAL, right? Something that's important to me and I think effectively and I have a good game plan, you know, that's moderate success. We're not up for moderate success. You know, we're up for achieving something that some people think is impossible. And you're looking at somebody who is passion powered, vision guided, and action oriented. I'm an Olympian thinker. And I really believe that everyone that I see out there, and most people of those 7 billion that you mentioned, get up every day and they're on the peace team, right? They care about peace, right? And they make lunch for their kids and they follow the dotted line on the freeway and they wait in line and they basically behave. So there's a peace wave. Everybody that wakes up, you know, is on the peace team and part of a wave of peace around the planet that most people don't notice. But we can up level and take a look at the different 8 sectors like we're going to in these next few days and notice what's the history of success, where are successes now, and who's involved in systemic change, and take advantage of things like what Gene Sharp provided for young people in many countries who were successful in nonviolent revolutions. So again, I don't know. I got, you know, I'm a fire hose man, so I'm not even sure I answered your question.
No, it was a beautiful beautiful answer, and I appreciate you know being able to share the graphic with the audience to help people understand the passion, the vision, the action are the essential pieces.
Yeah.
For peace.
Well, and what happened for me was, you know, when I had my Olympic Village experience, and I thought, you know, if people thought like Olympians, and I thought, oh, we've got 2 of the 3 things. People really care about peace. And by the way, over the last 40 years in my work, I've watched the desire for peace and the passion for peace go up significantly. And people want to do something, but if they don't believe it will really make a difference, they know a lot of things they can do, but will it really make a difference? Because they don't have what we're about to get to help people create and co-create. What is the story? The rest of the story, not just the story that is important about what the problems are, but instead of leaving people dispirited, we need to assist people in saying, it's a very small group of people in Israel, right, who are precipitating something that is so painful to me personally that my taxes are going to this. And yet at the same time, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the street in Israel who do not want what Netanyahu is precipitating. So we have the ability now, when the masses of people want to change, we know how to precipitate that change. You know, Paul Hawkins' work in Drawdown shows us that there are tons of things, answers, so we can speed shift what's happening in the environment. So the answers are out there in all of these sectors, but as long as people are dispirited and only fed things that make them feel impotent, they won't get involved. But we can up-level the peace team that exists of people who care up to the Olympic level so they learn to think effectively about what it is they care about.
Well, let's speak to the both the the dispirited, but also the lack of peace literacy. And I want to shift our conversation to the peace ladder, because I think that's a critical component here. Because when folks talk about peace, there's this distorted understanding of what is peace, and people think of it as rainbows and unicorns and kumbaya. So let's. I'm gonna pull up the peace ladder and share it with our audience, and I'll invite you to speak to it.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. As a pentathlete, I had 5 events that I was working on, and I understood that how we think about peace, it's just, very amorphous and kind of hard to pin down. And when I saw Avon's work that came from decades worth of summits at the United Nations, global gatherings of people around the world focused on certain issues, she wound up creating these 8 sectors that are really kind of like the underpinnings for peace. So I thought, oh, there's the game plan, right? People care. People like the Brahma Kumaris helped us see that we actually all think in very similar ways about what the goal is. But, in terms of thinking, what's the game plan? Oh, it's too amorphous. Oh, here's one way of thinking about it, right? So one of the things that happened for me in looking to try to interrupt when people would say, good luck with that, is peace possible in the future, as if it doesn't exist? I had to find some way to interrupt that thinking. So I just started with some drawings, and then I created what you see in front of you. And I took it to this place where people were walking by a table about Peace Day. And I just handed them stars. And I said, hey, are you interested in peace? And of course, people go, well, yeah, of course. And I said, do me a favor. We wanted to find out, just what you think about where you are relative to like different levels or different stratas of peace. So the bottom rung is, so we know what not peace looks like. There are war zones that are really important for us to address. But, is that where you live right now in a war? No, I'm not in a war zone. It's like, oh, okay. So then the next level is, well, then there's like barely peace. It's not a war zone, but it's like, so like that might be like a refugee camp where there's peace, but just like barely peace. Is that where? Nope, that's not where they are. So they're going to put their star, about where they are on the peace ladder. And I said, well, let's go up one more rung, basic peace. I got to travel in India and just watch places where there was a lot of poverty, but when you looked at the way people were cooperating and, they clearly had enough to eat, right? And they had a roof over their head, and, there was a lot of cooperation and a lot of joy and all kinds of things. But so they had basic peace, right? Is that where you live? It's like, no, I got more than that. It's like, oh, okay. So the next rung up I created, I don't have a good word for it, but I call it relative peace, right? And it's like, I'm at least the 4th generation that has lived in relative peace. I've got way more than a roof over my head. I've got full grocery stores. I can put gas in my car. I've got a full refrigerator. I've got, I can take a vacation, right? This is more than basic peace. I live in relative peace. And that's how I see most people where I live. No matter what people think about Oakland, we have war zones in Oakland, but most people stand in line, and help one another. So then the top rung, it says perfect peace in there, but I talk to my friends about sweet peace. For me, sweet peace is when we get to move everybody up a rung of the ladder. And once we do that, it's like dominoes, it's game over, game on kind of thing. So I really encourage people to think about, just look how many generations and look across your community. And it's not like there aren't challenges and that there aren't non-peace things happening, like we're still using fossil fuel in our cars and, plastic and those kinds of things. There are many, many kinds of things that don't contribute to peace, but I'm talking about, just a basic kind of relative peace. So again, I keep saying I hope it's helpful, Tom, because I can go down rabbit holes.
Well, that's that the peace ladder, I think, is a critical piece of or component of the literacy that needs to happen.
Yes.
As I said before, most people, when you talk about peace, they have this story in their head that it's not possible, or they have this story in their head that it is, it's rainbows and unicorns. And the reality is that, as I said at the opening of the show, the vast majority of the 8 billion people on the planet are living in some version, some place on that peace ladder
Yeah.
of peace all the time.
Yep, absolutely. And, the whole thing about measures is really important. I'm really excited about having an ongoing conversation with Jim about maybe partnering with Humanity Rising so that, like the 2 weeks before Peace Day, we're on either side of Peace Day this year. But, what if every year we were able to use the kinds of, it's like we're living in an age in which you can know just about anything you want to know. And so my question to people is, if you can know anything you want to know, what's important to know? And for me, it's like, you want to know things that you care about, that are important to you. Well, do you care about peace? So peace literacy needs to take a giant step up. And I believe that the Pathways to Peace, Peace Wheel, and inviting people in to share their information, to crowdsource information about the history status and who's doing systemic change in your area or in an area you care about, so that people who want to up level and be part of, a winning team for peace, can up their game from being on the peace team and doing the best you can to thinking like an Olympian. Be clear about the goal, be clear about your role, and have daily practices that increase the peace. And we can do that so easily and so effectively.
I'm just wondering, as we talk about literacy, and we look at, tomorrow's program is going to be on governance and law. Over the last 400 years, over 100 countries in the world have become democratic or some version of democracies.
Yep.
And we will be talking over the next 2 weeks across each of those 8 sectors of the progress that humanity has made over the last 100 years.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, do you think we want to play the Hans Rosling video just to show one example of progress that humanity has made? And
yes, thank you. That would really be fun.
Okay. All right, let me share that.
"200 Years That Changed the World," a Gapminder video with Hans Rosling.
It was the last 200 years that changed the world. I will show you in Gapminder world here the situation 1809. Each bubble is a country. The size show the population, and the color show the continent. The brown here is West Europe, and you can see from the map for the rest.
So we're not able to see it.
Shows health, life expectancy at birth from 30 years, 80 years.
It's not
this axis.
It's not sharing.
Income per person.
You can only see the opening slide with his name on it.
It's not, somehow it didn't, his voice is clear, but the video is not moving.
All right, let me try it again.
Yep. What I love about this is that it's a way to interrupt people's thinking about things have always been bad and they'll never get better.
200 years that changed the world.
So we can't see it.
Building. Here, the situation 1809. Each bubble is a country.
Still cannot see the video.
Okay.
Got a screen share.
Yeah, I'm sharing the screen. Not sure why it's not working.
Yeah. Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll play around with it.
Zoom happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
For the audience, what Hans Rosling is, he recently died a couple of years ago, but he was a statistician from Maryland, Sweden.
Yes.
And he's been able to use, or in his work, he was using global data and showing it in a way with technology that actually helps us see what the reality is of what's happening in the world. Maybe you want to speak to his work, Marilyn.
Yeah, he was a really very fun, playful guy, and realized that pie charts and lists of data really weren't changing people's minds. And so he is able to take pretty complex data and create a story and a visual that has you just go, wow, really? And it just shifts you from feeling impotent about being able to do anything to seeing, wow, things really have changed. And that, with increased information and peace literacy, you can see, where you belong and what you're doing that's contributing and something that you're passionate about making a difference in, and that people already have solutions in that domain and how you can support them. So it's a very exciting moment on the planet from my perspective. But granted, not everybody was in the Olympic Village. Not everybody had Willis Harman, Avon Madison, and many of the other people. I was privileged to be in a 5-year think tank on the role of business and peace building. One guy was being groomed to be the president of Mexico, and somebody else knew the history of the monetary system. I come from a very privileged set of experiences, but now people can see what I see. And we can create it in a way like what Hans Rosling did, to present it in ways that people go, wow, and invite them in to new behaviors, new activities, new ways of thinking, and show them that what they're doing is making a difference as part of our team. So I'm very excited to be alive and awake and to be presenting from a metaphor of the Olympic peace team and inviting people to up their game.
Well, a question for you, Marilyn. We've been talking about speed shifting, and we're going to spend the next 2 weeks in each of the sectors, the 8 sectors, to help our audience understand and become more literate about what is the reality, what's actually happening in the world. But let's talk about the global narrative that peace isn't possible, and how do we speed shift, and how do we in a nanosecond change that story about the reality of what's actually existing on the planet?
Yeah. So, the notion, it's like one new thought can change your whole life. And I shifted from maybe on a relay team to I could be in the Olympics. And even though it was a stupid, crazy, no evidence, right? I couldn't make it go away. So I had new thoughts that led to new behaviors that increased the possibility. And that's what happened relative to peace. I saw we could see peace in my lifetime. This 5-part game plan showed up, and I saw that each of these was not only possible, but people were doing things, and my job was to bring it together. But from the notion of speed shifting, I want to just share with you, I understand about being in the depths of depression and just, feeling, suicidal, right? And how do we shift? And I'll share a very brief version of a story of my dear friend, Eddie Hart. And for those of you who aren't old enough, in 1972, Eddie Hart, when he was 13 years old, he was seized by a thought that he could be the world's fastest human because he saw something. And he couldn't get it out of his mind. And he stopped smoking dope with his friends. And when he went to Cal, he never drank beer. And he would say, why would I? He just woke up every day about the idea of being the world's fastest human. And from 13 years old, we're now at the 1972 Olympic trials. He's nursing a hamstring, and he's kind of not quite coming out of the starting blocks full speed. And he qualifies 4th going into the final. Now he's in the final with the fastest men in the world who all want to be on the Olympic team in Munich. And he realizes he's just got to go for it. And the gun goes off, and he gets the best start of his life. And the gun goes off a second time because there was someone else false started. He gets back in the blocks. He is absolutely crystal clear that he's going to be the world's fastest human. When he crosses the finish line, he ran the fastest time in the world that year. Now we're in Munich, Germany. He goes through his first qualifying round. He cruises through by 30 meters. He knows he's going to qualify for the semis. The coach sends him back to the village to rest for the afternoon race. And then he sees a different schedule and realizes that the races are coming up sooner in the afternoon. And again, I'll fast forward a very, very dramatic story, but he winds up jumping on the NBC News bus, and they're rushing him to try to get to the stadium. And there are semifinals live on the video in the bus. He jumps off the bus and is going through the tunnel when the gun goes off for his race. And there is you don't get to be in the next one. Eddie Hart missed his race. He talks about going back to the village and being in the shower for an hour and a half. And he says he never knew there was such pain. And he talks very, very eloquently about what that felt like. And then he remembered people were counting on him to anchor the 4x100 relay team, in which he would be up against Valery Bortsov, who was the guy who wound up winning the gold medal from Russia. And he speed shifted from the depths of depression to standing on the track with his hand out and taking off to receive the baton and win the gold medal. So Eddie and I talk about what it takes to speed shift. And it can happen in one thought. And that's what we're about to do for people relative to peace. We're going to go from stinking thinking to Olympian thinking about peace. And part of it is providing information that supports people in seeing the reality of the whole story about who people are, that people get up every day as part of a peace wave that goes around and around the planet and interrupt your stinking thinking about what's possible and up level so that you play your part. You're clear about the goal, you're clear about your role, and that you can just take a deep breath like athletes do, exhale, find that peace within. And when you step out into the world, whatever you're doing next, you are more peaceful. You will probably increase the peace a little better in the next thing that you did. And because of programming like ours, you can find out how to be involved in systemic change about what you care about. That's what speed shifting is about.
So let's take this down to an actionable, practical level. You've shared with us three moments in your life when you were that teenager that realized you could be in the Olympics. You were in the Olympic Village and you realized that peace was possible. And you were nursing a debilitating injury that was going to prevent you from competing, and you qualified for your third Olympic team. In each of those moments, you had a defining experience where you had to let go of your beliefs. You saw what was possible, and then you put it in action. And so for our audience, what do you want to leave the audience with? What are 1, 2, 3 things that they can do starting in this moment to realize that peace is possible, that peace already exists, and what they can be doing to change their beliefs and to help change or shift the beliefs, the story of others?
Well, this will be fun. I'm going to give you 2 things. So one, I've got the peace card here, which is connected to the peace wheel. And it's 8 statements that are like 8 goal statements in each of the sectors. And I'm going to read it to you. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the way it's written as a product of Pathways to Peace says, and I'm going to ask everyone to just take a deep breath and exhale. And it says, imagine a world where governments respect the human rights of all their citizens and settle disputes by the rule of law for the common good. Just imagine a world where government looks like that. Imagine a world where all people have food, shelter, and access to medical care, and children are born into and raised by healthy families and communities. Imagine a world where literacy and education for all are accomplished facts. Imagine a world where economic practices create well-being for all stakeholders, including communities and the environment. Imagine a world where beauty, the arts, and the media inspire the best in people. Imagine a world where the benefits of science and technology enhance all circles of life. Where tolerance and appreciation of diverse religious beliefs is the rule, Spiritual practice is encouraged and reverence for life is fostered. And finally, imagine a world where the earth in all her natural beauty is treasured, her resources utilized sustainably for this and future generations. So this is a vision. This is an image of peace that is broken into these 8 sectors. But in the work that I do, I encourage people to take a 10-day challenge because it's really nice. Imagine a world that's kind of, well, that's really nice. You know, I ask people to take the peace card, and I can make it easily available to you, and it's on the Pathways to Peace website. But I invite you to set your clock 5 minutes early, and on the first day, just read it like that, and say, imagine a world in each one of these, and you know, it's nice. On day 2, I ask you to change the beginning. Instead of saying imagine a world, say, you know what? I want to live in a world where governments respect the human rights of all. There's an energetic shift that happens when you go from imagine. It starts to be inside. This is something I want. And then, oh, no, I misspoke here. So imagine, I wish is what I have for day 2. I wish I lived in a world that looked like this, right? And that's a little easier to step into. And the third day, you repeat everything with, I want to live in a world. And then the next day, you say, I intend to live in a world. That puts you into cognitive dissonance because your brain is going, I intend to live in a world. Your brain just starts to do that. Just like I could be in the Olympics, my brain went like this. Your brain will do cognitive dissonance. And what I encourage people to do I think it's the 5th day or 6th day, forgive me, I've lost my count, is to choose one that seems to have juice for you. And for the remainder of the 10 days, wake up every morning 5 minutes early and just say, I intend to live in a world where literacy and education for all are accomplished facts. That's the one that has juice for me. Choose the one that has juice for you and just repeat it for the remainder of 10 days and then send me an email because you will have, you will have a paradigm shift because you will have new thoughts that can lead you to new behaviors and to assist us in that particular area. So that's one activity. Is that pretty clear, Tom?
It is.
I have an easier one. Here it is. This is one of my favorite because there's something called airtime. We're spending most of our airtime in worry and stress and concern and the to-dos and all of that. That's not where Eddie Hart spent his time. That's not where Marilyn King spent her time. My airtime was, I could be in the Olympics and everything had to true itself up to that. And things that didn't, I let go of. Things that were okay, I continued. And then there were new things I had to do. So the stop sign is ubiquitous. It is all over the world. And I love what this has the potential to do in terms of speed shifting. So I use the letter S for stop. So every time you see a stop sign, what do? You stop, mostly, right? The T is for take a breath. That's what Olympians do. When they called my name, I didn't step up on the runway and go jump. I stepped up on the runway and I took a breath. They're about to do the 100 meters and the gun's going to go off. So I have to eliminate outside distractions. In that breath, I have to notice that my mind was still pretty busy with, got my shirt on right or whatever the crap was. But in that breath at the bottom, I had to find that quiet place of peace. And the only thing I did was to recall my highest aspiration, what I was about to do in that jump. So stop, take a breath, eliminate outside distractions, quiet your mind, find that quiet place of peace inside. That's for me what the O is for Olympian think. Then when you take another breath, the letter P is you proceed. So every time you see a stop sign, you can increase the peace. Took a breath, exhaled, eliminated all that kind of stuff. And whatever you do next, even if that person cut you off, you'll have a different thought and you'll increase the peace. So the other thing that I do is I actually am always challenged to up my game. So on my phone, my phone chimes on the hour. And every time that I can, when it chimes on the hour, I stop, take a breath, find that quiet place in between, notice how I've been doing in the last hour relative to peace, notice what I'm doing in the next hour, and how can I do it from that place to increase the peace. So those are my two suggestions: the 10-day challenge and stop, take a breath, Olympian think, and proceed. So thank you for asking that one, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. Because part of what we're wanting to do with Humanity Rising is to not only educate and inform, but also to give people really simple things that they can do in their daily life. And for me, and you and I've talked about this over the years we've known each other, is how do we increase peace literacy? How do we help people understand that the story they're holding on to is that this version of sweet peace is not possible, or it doesn't exist, or a peaceful world is beyond their reach. And having daily practices, taking actions, changing the narrative, changing the story is possible, and it's necessary, and it can happen in a nanosecond.
Yep. And I'm telling my friends right now, I'm an Olympic athlete, and I usually made a 4-year commitment. And when I stepped into this peace thing, I had no idea it would take this long. There was a 0 after the 4. So I've been at this for 40 years. But I'm making one more commitment, and I've actually got this over here that I carry. I'm doing Paris to LA. Paris is just over. The next Olympic Games are in LA. And in this next 4 years, don't bet against me. But those 3 billion people who know about Peace Day, there will be more of them. And all of those who are participating in Peace Day situations around the world, we're going to be able to up-level what happens on Peace Day in these celebrations, so that people who care about peace are inspired, informed, and engaged. And over this next 4 years, I'm passing the baton to people who are way smarter than me, and will take it to places I've never been. But we can engage, the passion, the vision, and the action of people who care about peace to up their game.
Yeah, thank you for that, Marilyn. And as we invite Jim back into the conversation, I just want to reiterate a message you shared before, which is all of us as human beings, we come into this world members of the peace team. And your invitation, your work is to have people join the Olympic peace team.
Yeah, up your game to the Olympic level of peace team. Yep. It's not that hard. You just align your passion with your vision, and it will play out in your action. And there are 7 billion of us who care and are willing to do something when we shift our thinking.
Wow. Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Marilyn. Thank you. You really embody your own words and vision and commitment. So I just want to acknowledge that and to say that's what makes the world go round, everyone, is people that walk their talk and do those things necessary to be the proximate causation of what they seek to achieve.
Well, let me say it this way, Jim. It's it's Olympians throughout time have been seen as messengers, right? So my friends don't like it when I say this, like, I'm just a messenger. But the message is we can make it as a planet and a species, and what you think matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you think makes a difference in the overall totality. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to shift from stinking thinking to Olympian thinking about peace.
By the way, tell us, have you formulated plans for this Paris to LA?
Oh, absolutely.
4 years. You're just creating the vision.
No. There's no
container.
There's a website. There's a game plan. There's
fantastic
daily practices, and so we're yes, absolutely. Paris to LA, you will be able to actually engage. So the website is about to go up. People just found that there is a place where you can aggregate. So here's a fun one. We'll be inviting people, in order to assist the mind shift, to every day like right now, I can look out my window and take a picture and upload it with hashtag looks like peace to me / OAK for Oakland. And then I can put a 1, 2, or a 3. I can score 1 point for the peace team just because I did this myself. So hashtag looks like peace to me, OAK, somebody scored a point. If I do something additional out in the world today, that's worth 2 points. Then if you want to be like a Steph Curry with a 3-pointer, let people know that you're engaged in systemic change in something. So we just found a place where you can aggregate hashtags on any social media platform, and they can all go to one place. So you can scroll and see hashtag looks like to me Bangladesh, hashtag looks like to me, all over the world, and just shift people's thinking about who people are and what's going on. That's what we get to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. The one theme I'd like to just have you amplify on, and you too, Tom, is the relationship between peace and nonviolence. Because I think the Olympics, as you were saying, is a perfect example of the synergies that need to take place and can take place between almost ruthless competition and a camaraderie in which the competition never spills over into violence, so that you can be, within 1/100th of a millisecond of winning or losing, and you get to the other side having run the 100 meters as competitively as possible, and then you hug each other. It's an extraordinary thing, that this relationship between peacefulness and a commitment to nonviolence. So I'd love to have you speak to that relationship, because I think it's important conceptually for us to hold that. And I know, Tom, you're absolutely passionate about that as well, but it seems to me to be very important.
So I don't know, Tom, do you want to speak first? I certainly have my own,
Go ahead, Marilyn.
But you're you live in that world of educating people. But for me, it's like, I've got somebody next door who for 40 years, forgive me, has been shitting on my lawn, right? And doing all kinds of things. And you know what? It's like, I have this kind of, but I think we are not, I think we're basically a nonviolent species. We do not want to be in a fight. We do not want to be engaged in conflict. And most of us do everything we can to avoid that. And then finally, sometimes it's like something happens and you just have to punch them in the face, But that is not what most of us want to do. And most of us, no matter how angry we are, that guy cut us off, right? What we want to do with our car then, but most of us don't do it. Yeah. So when you talk about nonviolence, and when people say we need to move from a culture of violence to a culture of peace, it's like you are looking for a very, very different lens from me. I do not live in a culture of violence. I live in a culture where people are stressed and concerned and scared and even blaming other people. But I don't live in a culture of violence. I live in a culture where people are doing their best and are part of the peace wave and get up every day as part of the peace team and do their best. So that's my perception on nonviolence.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that and just share a couple of things as I understand them. So, my genuine belief, based on neuroscience, based on sociology, biology, psychology, all of our sciences have absolutely definitively shown that we're a nonviolent species. And yet we each can be triggered to be violent in a moment.
That's right.
And so if we look at the Salt March and Gandhi, they trained for 17 years before doing the Salt March. Dr. King had all of his followers doing nonviolent training. David Hartsoe and the folks who were involved in in integrating the lunch counters, did nonviolence training before going into violent settings or potential violent settings. And that's just an acknowledgement, a recognition that we have within us the ability to be violent, but it's not our true nature. If we look at nonviolent communication, we will observe something that can evoke an emotional response within us, that there's an underlying need that that emotion is an indication of a met or unmet need. But then we can make a request, we can develop a strategy, we can take an action or not take an action based on something that could be provoking us in a moment. But you know, as has been often said, people who've been trained in war come back with PTSD. But there's no documented case of somebody having PTSD from love.
I feel like I fell in love and got dumped, and I'm suffering from PTSD.
Yeah, I was going to say, except for unrequited love. When they don't love you back, Tom.
But we don't suffer PTSD. We have a momentary, a temporary feeling
Take your
of
point.
loss.
Take your point.
Yes, Tom.
And you know, nonviolence is an essential component of a peaceful world. It's foundational.
Yeah, it's foundational.
Yes.
It's
This
that
is
agree.
you guys. Thank you for this airtime.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good moment to bring this to a close. Tom, Marilyn, why don't you tee us up for what we're going to be exploring tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow we're gonna start with one of the 8 sectors, which is governance and law, and understanding the role that governance and law plays, whether we're talking at the United Nations level, at the nation state level, or the community level. There's an important role that governance and rule of law plays in living in a peaceful world. And you know, we can look at over the last century the extraordinary amount of work that's been done with, you know, initially the League of Nations, succeeded by the United Nations, that has allowed for a peaceful coexistence. And you know, the UN certainly gets lots of pushback and has its critics, but it's played an extraordinary role in the level of peace that we've had.
Yes.
As I mentioned before, over the last 400 years, we've had over 100 countries that have adopted democracy or some version of democracy, which has helped ensure that we've got rule of law and that people can trust that they can live their daily life with some semblance of security. And so we'll start at the highest level tomorrow in the sector of governance, law, and security.
Yeah, and for me, I have emblazoned in my brain, I saw this graph that in the 1800s, at the bottom of the graph was how many democracies there were, and it goes flat, and then all of a sudden it shoots up. And now we know that, you know, that it waves. It's not just a straight shot all the way, but we now know that there are things we can do to assist, you know, up leveling the governance thing. So I'm going to encourage, we are at the beginning of creating what I feel like is a report card. So I encourage anyone who's listening and joins us tomorrow. We're wanting to tell the whole story of governance so we can see ancient cultures. What kind of successful governance systems? What were the elements that were there? Where, when peace exists right now, successful governments and governance systems, right? And we get to share some about what we know about speed shifting. So thank you, Gene Sharp. But we also have AI, and we have tools where we can ask. I would love to have what they call a prompt engineer. So when I'm sitting here and I ask, it's just, well, I really wonder how many of the emerging democracies, you know, are still moving in that direction versus ones that are like having backslides now and what's going on. So there's all kinds of information. I'm a generalist. I don't have this information, but we can create this report card so people can see the status, who's doing what. And if you believe government is the most important thing to speed shift, there are people that know how to do it. And the last thing I'll say about that is I feel like in terms of people being dispirited and saying, yeah, it's like, how dare you? I followed John Lewis, and you talk about speed shifting and a change that has happened in our country and what that man did. How dare you? How dare you be dispirited and not vote?
Important reminder for our election coming up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Okay.
John Lewis inspires me every day. His courage. I'm an introvert. This kind of speaking is not something I am comfortable with, but I have to. And John Lewis is an inspiration for me. There will be people, there will be backlash. There will be, oh, good luck with that, Marilyn. Oh, very nice, very inspirational. It's like,
Yeah.
Here. You want to take it and run with it? You want to do your part on the peace team, or you want to just, anyway, forgive me for going there.
No, hats off to you. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Tom. Marilyn and Tom are both going to join the after chat. So you can join them for a more informal conversation there. You'll see the link in the chat box. You also received it in your Zoom reminder for today. And then tomorrow we'll be deepening our exploration of this best kept secret of peace through an examination of peace in the realm of governance. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
We're
Marilyn.
moving to when peace is no longer a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just close with the Ernest Hemingway quote again. How did the world have peace? Two ways: gradually, then suddenly.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.